What's good, everybody? My name's Dan Kornhauser.
And my name is Bobby Hunt.
Thank you guys for tuning in for our first ever Dan and Bob Talking Sports podcast video recording.
Yes, first
Videocast.
video that we have, so people get to see our faces, put some faces to the names. I'm Bobby Hunt.
And I'm Dan. That's this guy right
Yeah,
here.
that's you.
We have a lot to get into, Bob. It is draft season. Yes, COVID is tearing a hole through our nation and through the sports world, but we have some relief. The NFL draft is coming up literally in just a couple of days. It's the most exciting time of the year for, I would say, anyone whose team didn't win the Super Bowl. And for teams like the Giants and the Lions and some of the other teams that our friends that are all but, this is our Super Bowl pretty much. So for me, I get really excited for the draft. I don't know why I get so excited for the draft because my favorite team, Detroit Lions, constantly piss me off. They did last year. They've done it more often than not, but it's here. All that matters is that it's here. It's time. And we got a lot to get into. Bob, are you ready?
I am definitely ready, and it's springtime. That's where hope springs eternal. It's a good time of year. Everyone's excited. The weather warms up. It's a different one, though, because everything's changed with COVID going on. But, start of the baseball season is usually around this time. And in the draft, same idea. You're drafting young players into the league, so you have some hope that maybe there'll be a generational talent. So hopefully the Giants and Lions don't screw it up picking third and fourth.
Yes, hopefully is right. But let's go right into it. We're going to talk about the offense now. There's a lot going on that we haven't talked about since the combine. And draft boards are set. Rankings are set. Teams have an idea where they want to go. Now they just got to make the call. Everything's going to take place virtually. There's not going to be a site for the NFL draft for the first time due to COVID. It was supposed to be in Las Vegas. It's not going to be now. Now all these teams are doing these things at home or on-site, off-site, somewhere else. They're just not going to do it together. It should be a very interesting experience. It's not something that we ever dealt with before, something we've ever seen. So I'm kind of curious to see how things go. And this morning, I think they ran their first test, their mock draft, if you will, and they had issues with the first pick. So it's not very inspiring, but we'll see.
And with that first pick, it's going to be no suspense, at least. The Bengals at this point should just tell NFL it's going to be Joe Burrow. If there's any glitches or buffoonery on Thursday night, we're taking Joe Burrow, rest assured, and there's no worries there. It's going to happen. Joe Burrow will be drafted by them, number one. And let's talk about him a little bit. He's a presumptive number one pick. Mm-hmm. And while we both love Tua Tagovailoa, at least on my board, I do have Joe Burrow number one at quarterback. Now, the medical concerns with Tua definitely slide him down slightly for me, but he's still in the top five for me. He's number 5 overall, and I have Joe Burrow number 2, actually. And
interesting.
Second only to Chase Young out of Ohio State. I think the Bengals can't screw this up. He's a hometown kid. He's from the Cincinnati area, roughly, suburbs. Went to Ohio State, and he just put up one of the best seasons of all time by any college player, and to be a quarterback, won the Heisman. And when I check the tape, I love everything I see. I think he's going to be a great player at the next level. Great pocket awareness, anticipates throws. The pocket presence is top-notch. He always slides his feet. He's quick. He's athletic. He can move. Doesn't have the greatest deep arm. He's not a gunslinger by any stretch of the imagination, but he has good touchdown field. He can throw 40-yard passes, and he spread the ball around to all his weapons. Justin Jefferson's a top prospect in this draft. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is probably going to be a second-round pick at running back. You also have Thaddeus Moss enter the draft at tight end. They also have picks
a lot of prospects
along the line. So maybe there's some questions. Oh, well, he has so many good players around him, but I really saw a guy who was able to do everything and really elevate and lead his team. That's also an important factor. Is just the intangibles that he has. He was very calm, poised. I think he's a home run pick for the Bengals, and especially since the medicals check out, it's an easy number one pick.
I mean, it's hard to argue with you there, Bob. For me, my favorite things about Burrows is field vision. The fact that, he's the type of leader that you want leading your franchise. You'll hear from year to year, even in this year's class, quarterbacks that might have the physical tools, might have the gaudy statistics, and had a good pre-draft circuit and everything, and most likely going to be, high picks. But you have those guys who you question their leadership, that you hear teams come out and say, well, yeah, he's great and all this, but he's not the guy you can get a beer with, or he's not the kind of guy that's going to rile up the troops and get them going. He's not that kind of fiery leader. He's not that competitive guy. You just know he's going to come and do his job and shit. But for some teams, that's a problem. They want that guy. He's got that. He's got that leadership ability. He's fiery. The interviews are golden. I mean, the man was smoking a cigar after winning the chip. It's some legendary shit. I can definitely appreciate that.
He has swagger.
Yeah, and that's what you're looking for. Like, that's when you're evaluating these players. Like, we'll talk about this when we talk about the defense more in depth. But there's guys that stand out, like Jeff Okudah and even C.J. Henderson now, that have come out, and reports have come out from apparently teams saying that they question these guys and they don't maybe rate them that high, not because of any off the field problems, not because they're an issue or any athletic liabilities. No, it's just because they're not dogs. They're not fiery competitors. They're not, those kinds of guys. They're quiet and more reserved. They just get their fucking jobs done. So it's weird to talk about, but I guess for some teams it is part of the evaluation process. But for Burrow, that's not a problem. And then with Tua, this was supposed to be the tank for Tua year. Everybody was talking about it. That was the moniker. That was the line, tank for Tua. And it was pretty much Tua for most of the year. Then he hurt his hip, and the rest, as we know, is history. But all the medicals seem to be coming back okay. Doctors who had an opportunity to check him out, including at the combine and such, that got their hands on him, are comfortable. They seem comfortable enough with the prognosis and how things are developing and how he's coming along with the recovery, and they seem to be good with it for the most part. But we're getting more reports coming out that people are not sure, they're afraid of the injuries. I think how's he going to take it, so on and so forth. And to that end, he might even drop. There's rumors now that Tua might drop out of the top 10. That now he's going to be in the eye of the Patriots, and I want to vomit. I can't even think about that right now. But that's what we're hearing. Do you take any stock in any of that talk? Do you think Tua's falling out of the top 10? Are you buying it, or is this just pre-draft bullshit?
I do think there's something to it. I do think there is smoke where there's smoke there, and there is some fire to it. I do believe he could fall down some boards, and definitely certain teams have flagged him and probably won't take him past a certain point in the draft. With that said, I still think it's very likely he lands in that 6 to 10 range of the draft. It should be to the Chargers. I think the Dolphins should take him, but it seems like there's some pause there. At the end of the day, they might be just putting out their own rumors also. I think they've been a team that's been putting a lot of smoke screens out there. I do think their interest in Tua is real, but they are concerned. And the situation with the coronavirus in this country right now is hurting guys' stocks that have questionable medicals. It's just a fact right now. These teams would love to get them into their building, run them through a physical, check them out, meet with their team doctors, and even just meet him in person, just to see what kind of player he is, not only just the medicals, but also that, and really get him into the meeting rooms. I believe I heard earlier this week, I want to say it was the Chargers, were actually trying to get him in that Friday before everything really got crazy. It was March 12th was the Thursday when the NBA stopped its season. Mm-hmm. And then I think he was supposed to visit, I believe it was the Chargers. It could have been the Dolphins, one of those two teams picking right there that he might land with. Mm-hmm. And they weren't able to get it done. That's when the NFL came out that day, that Friday, March 13th, and halted all activities, and people and teams started pulling everyone off the road. So unfortunately for Tua, that could hurt him. I do think there is some truth to certain teams doing it, but I don't think it's everybody. And as we always talk about with the draft, you just need one team to fall in love and take you. And Tua, to me, if it weren't for the injuries, would be my number one quarterback, but that does slide him down. And also Joe Burrow just had an unbelievable season. He checked a lot of the boxes that I had for him. And just real quickly with him too, I'm going to throw out some comparisons out there. And let me preface this, because this first one's going to be very lofty. This is more just kind of style and play and how they look when I see them play football. And it's not to say that they're going to live up to this status as a player, but it's just kind of what they look like. And also to give you an idea and usually use a better player. If I tell you someone looks like, Todd Marinovich, you're not going to know what I'm talking about. Or, oh, he plays like Alan Hearns. Like, it's a weird comparison. For some of us that are fiends, we know what kind of style player that is.
Mm-hmm.
But to the casual fan, it's better to use players over the last, a couple decades or so that were either star players or very good players, people that everyone knows about. So without further ado, Joe Burrow does honestly compare to Tom Brady. Just the way he delivers the ball, kind of some of the poise he has. I think the way he delivers, if you look at him, especially on a lot of those checkdowns that he has to, say, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, or crossing patterns to Justin Jefferson, just the way he delivers the ball, it does remind you of Tom Brady. And I've heard some other scouts say he does look that way. Do I think
That's lofty as shit.
Of course. And I don't think he'll be that kind of quarterback to the next level, but I think you're looking at a 10 to 15-year starter in the league, could have plenty of years where he's the top 10 quarterback. And if you're picking him number one, yeah, you hope he's more like a perennial Pro Bowler. And I think he could be that, but I don't know if he's one of the best prospects ever to come out, but he is coming off one of the best seasons ever.
Yeah, he absolutely is. But let's not forget about Tua, dude. Well, we're going to be slurping Joe Burrow, and yes, the man's right. Everything about him seems to scream franchise quarterback. You know how I feel about one-year wonders. You know how I feel about that.
That is true. I mean, he did start last year and didn't have nearly as productive of a season, but at least he did start the previous year for LSU.
He did. But let's not forget about Tua, all right? If it wasn't for this hip injury, which let's not downplay it. This is a very serious concern because this isn't the first time the NFL or NFL teams have seen a player with hip issues like this. Just go back to Dennis Pitta, just 5-6 years ago. I think he dislocated hip in 2013 or something like that, and he was never the same. Like, he came back in 2013, but in 2014 he dislocated his hip again. Then they told him he probably shouldn't play, but he came back in 2016 and he played well, but then he dislocated his hip a third time in 2017 during OTAs. Now teams are concerned about the same thing with Tua. And yes, that's valid, but the talent is mouth-watering. And the only questions with Tua revolve around the medicals, which the hip injury, lower leg injuries, I think ankle problems he's had, ankle surgeries or something like that. I know he fucked up his thumb. It happens. It does happen. Durability is a concern. I don't care about his height. I don't care about his lack of having a gun, being able to gun it downfield like Mahomes or Vic or someone who's got a rocket arm like that. That's fine. I'm not going to hold that against him, but it is a concern, and I do get it with Tua. But you don't want to be the guy that your franchise needs a quarterback, and you pass on him, especially if you don't have an established stud in the building. I mean, it sounds good for a team like the Chargers to come out and say, oh, yeah, Tyrod Taylor's our guy. We think he could be an effective starter in our system. He's a good leader, blah, blah, blah. That sounds great. But I would like to think we know what Tyrod Taylor is at this point. And yes, a new system and a new philosophy could put that player in a different position to produce above his current career arc and above maybe his talent level per se, because we've seen it before. We've seen coaches coach up that talent, but let's be honest, I don't know if Anthony Lynn and that offensive staff is doing some new age shit that's going to make Tyrod Taylor a star quarterback and make them win 12 games with him. They're probably going to want to run the ball and play defense. That's their moniker, but I'm not sold on something like that. And if I'm not sold, I'm not in the building, and if you want to say I don't know anything, that's fine. But if a person who doesn't know anything, the outside looking in is concerned for them, looking at his career, looking at how their team is built and stuff like that, you have to wonder, well, yeah, Tua's medicals are a concern, but if you have a dire need or you have a need at the position, it's the most important position. Some of these teams are not going to be picking up there or don't often pick up there to take a quarterback of this caliber. So if the Dolphins really go with Herbert at 5, let's say, and Tua sitting on the board at 6, do the Chargers have other positions they need to address? Yes. But yeah, it's rule number 1 when it comes to fucking the draft, to the NFL draft, football in general. If you don't have a quarterback, you go get one. It's that simple. And I get it if they think they have their quarterback, and that's fine. But you have to plan for the future in case he's not.
It's not fine at all. They need to go with a quarterback. I think where the Dolphins and Chargers are, it should be Tua and Herbert. Now, which order it goes in, I don't know. But I think those should be the picks. I think where they're picking, it has to be done, especially if you're the Dolphins, because you've made it known in the past that you really love Tua Tagovailoa. He was a presumptive pick coming into this year's draft. He burst on the scene in 2017 in the national championship game against Georgia and had an outstanding second half replacing Jalen Hurts. So we've both seen a lot of his games, and I really dove into a lot of his tape recently, primarily from this past season versus LSU, also at South Carolina. I also looked back at the 18 SEC game against Georgia for the championship, and there's a lot to like. He throws tight spirals. That's a better attribute than, say, Joe Burrow. They both have good ball placement, but he's more of a true dual threat than, say, Burrow. Burrow's athletic. He can run very well.
Yeah. I think he had 5 rushing touchdowns or something this past year.
Yes, he did, and along with the 50 passing TDs, which is just ridiculous. But
60.
But Tua, oh, you're right. Yes, he had 60 passing TDs and the 5 rushing. But Tua is a true dual threat. All things considered, he's more athletic, more of a playmaker than him. I compare him kind of to Mark Brunell. It's an easy comparison because Mark Brunell was also lefty, but is kind of a similar style player. I also see a little bit of Favre in him sometimes when he tries to make plays and really will be a gunslinger. He throws the ball hard every play. But honestly, if he has time to throw, he's going to pick apart a defense. He is accurate at all levels. He sees the field well. I don't worry about his height, just like you. The medicals is by far the biggest question mark, and understandably so. But if I'm the Dolphins at 5, I'm picking there for a reason. And I also have 2 other first-round picks. I'm picking number 18 and 26 because of other trades I've made. So to me, I get 2 at 5. I don't play around. It may be risky, but you have other picks to address other needs. And they were very active in free agency. They brought in a lot of veteran talent. So this isn't a team that's completely barren at the moment. It looked like that early in the season when they're trading everybody away, just acquiring picks. But now they have draft capital, but also a decent amount of free agents they brought in. So I think the final piece is get that quarterback. To me, it should be Tua. He's my number 2 quarterback.
Yep, absolutely. I agree. He is the same for me. I got Burrow 1, Tua 2, and I got them 3 and 4 overall on my big board. Now, Justin Herbert and Jordan Love. These are the next 2 guys generally looked at in the quarterback rankings. I have Herbert at number 16 overall, and he's my last quarterback with a first-round grade. After that, I got Love at 39th overall in my final big board, which is good for an early second-round grade, but where are you on these 2 guys? Because they're 2 similar prospects, but they're very, very different places right now. You got, both players have good arms, good size, mobile guys, can make every throw. Both of them have played a lot of games for their respective schools and had a lot of starts. You like that. But Herbert is seen as more far ahead than Love is at this point. Love is considered, for the most part, by many analysts and online experts and stuff like that, Love is considered like the lottery ticket of this draft because the skills are there. The talent is there. And he has these amazing moments where he can improvise and he can run around and he can chuck it and he throws some pretty-ass passes to some wildly mediocre targets with a shitty O-line, new coaching staffs every year, just everything against him. And yes, this past year for Love was pretty shitty. The stats were ugly through a lot of picks. All his stats were down across the board except interceptions. But he was dealing with a lot of adversity. And then you look at Herbert, again, another one, good size, good arm, a lot of experience. But Herbert's more looked at as like the Josh Allen of this draft in that he's got that similar package. But even to Allen, I think he's further ahead than Allen was. What are your feelings on like where Herbert ends up? Do you really see him as a top 10 pick? Regardless, I think he'll be a top 10 pick. And how sold are you on Jordan Love as a potential first-round pick? 'Cause me personally, I'm not a fan at all.
All right, well, I'll start with Justin Herbert. I have less positive views about Jordan Love, so I'll save that for a little later. I'll start with Justin Herbert out of Oregon. He's been a starter for 3 years now, and 4 years even. He's a senior quarterback. He chose to return after last year. He could have been the number 1 pick last year. Kyler Murray might have still passed him overall, but Justin Herbert could have been a top 5 pick last year. So fortunately for him, he didn't hurt his draft stock too much coming back. But he's one of those players that you were talking a bit earlier about not being rah-rah guys or being kind of quiet. And that's kind of what Justin Herbert is. Joe Burrow has the swagger. We've seen that on display. Tua Tagovailoa is somewhat reserved. He's got that Hawaiian relaxed state about him, but he does play very driven at times, and you see kind of him showing emotion at times while he's playing. You don't really see that much with Justin Herbert. He's definitely not a very vocal leader, but Oregon's had some very good seasons the last few years. Now, they haven't been as good as when they had Marcus Mariota, but I do like Herbert's size. Everyone does. 6'5", 230. He's got the prototypical build, but he does need at least a year sitting, in my opinion. I don't want to rush him out there. So maybe the Chargers at 6 is a good option because they do seem to really like Tyrod Taylor. And I'm fine with that at least for a few games, but to me, you shouldn't just be handing the reins to him. It makes no sense. They need to come away with a quarterback from this draft. And if they don't, they should be active for Cam Newton once things get back up to speed and people can actually bring him in for physicals. So to me, he should go top 10. I don't have him as a top 10 player on my board. I have Herbert 14th, but he is my 3rd quarterback. And as we know, the axiom of if you don't have a franchise quarterback, get one applies here. To me, he shouldn't slide past the Jaguars at 9. I could see people maybe worrying that he could be a Blake Bortles type. I see that more for Jordan Love. I think that's more what he's like. Justin Herbert, I don't have as much of a clear comparison for him. I think he'll be able to kind of be elusive and shed sacks like a Roethlisberger, but he's not that kind of big. I don't think he compares favorably as far as arm strength and what he does passing the ball. But he's a good player. He's been in shotgun the whole time, so that's another big concern. A lot of these quarterbacks have, so that is always a concern anyway over these years. We've seen plenty of guys come in and be able to do it, though, from a spread system. But I just don't think Justin Herbert sees the field nearly as well as Tua or Joe Burrow. So I think he should go after them. I think it would be foolish for a team to take Justin Herbert over Tua. Now let me get to Jordan Love out of Utah State. Now there's some excuses built in for him, and some of them valid. It does stink when you lose almost all your offensive playmakers and your O-line, coaching staff changes. It does hurt a player's development, especially at college. It's an important developmental time. But we do see players at other universities go through it too, even at the top programs. They get poached for their coaches all the time. Some have been able to stay pretty stable, but unfortunately for Jordan Love, that wasn't the case at Utah State. He's very mobile. He does have the requisite arm strength you look for, but just bad vision, locking onto first reads, not progressing well, sometimes scattershot presence in the pocket, doesn't show great footwork, just not as consistent with those important factors to really start right away at the next level. I think you got to take him playing at least for 1 year to sit, and ideally 2. I know that's not realistic, but at least 1 year, and that would make me feel better about him. I don't think he should be in the top 20. I have him actually 53rd on my big board. So to me, he's a second-round talent at best, and honestly, that grade's more influenced kind of just about some of the buzz about him and the fact that, people really like him. To me, he's more like a 3rd-round prospect, but looking at the tape, I see why they think if he's in the right system, this guy can be a high-level quarterback. And yes, he has the potential to be a starter in the league. I just don't see it. It would have to be a great fit for him and also have some patience with him.
Yeah, I only moved him up. I think I agree with you. I think his range is more like mid to late 2nd, 3rd round or something like that, because my main issues with him is we saw him at the Senior Bowl, and he was a redshirt junior, I believe, and he looked really good, man. He had moments where he showed the stuff that you're looking for. But then you also saw the issues with his field vision, with his accuracy, with his ball placement. And that was, like you said, that was a big issue in college too. He locked into his first reads a lot. He wasn't forced to read defenses consistently based on his offense that he was in. The turnover issues were there. The footwork is an issue. He's a development piece. But all the reports seem to say that a lot of teams really like him, and one of those teams is the Chargers. It's been rumored since like January that the Chargers were in love with this kid. Even at Senior Bowl, that shit picked up, and it got to the point during the combine where that was like a hot rumor and hotly debated topic. Like, if let's say Burrow's gone and Tua's gone, and they're looking at Herbert or Love, would they really pass on Herbert for Love? Or if Tua's still sitting there because Herbert's gone, are they really going to pass on Tua for Love at 6 overall? Or are they going to try to trade down and take him in the teens? That's a little rich for my blood. If they took him in the second round, cool. If they traded up for him at the end of the first round, cool, because we've seen the J.P. Lossmans of the world and so on and so forth. We see teams trade up for quarterbacks at the end of the second round. Lamar Jackson, etc. So it happens. There's
right.
precedent.
You mean the end of the first round?
End of the first round, right.
Right. So, and that will happen. I do think some team will probably take Jordan Love late in the first round. They'll trade, if they're not already in the back half of the first round, they'll trade into there so that they can have the contract where it's a 5-year contract, essentially. They have 4 years plus an option year, which as long as the quarterback's halfway decent and not like Mitch Trubisky, that option will get picked up and there would be no qualms. You won't have to renegotiate at that time. The Cowboys, unfortunately, are in a bad spot right now with Dak Prescott because he wasn't a first-round pick. He was only a third or fourth rounder. But with the quarterbacks, before we head on to the running backs, I do want to mention that I actually have Jalen Hurts fourth in my quarterback rankings. I've said to you that I love him, and I do think he's a winner. There are some questions about reading his progressions too, but I think his arm strength is above average. I think he is pretty accurate. I don't think he gets enough credit for that. I saw some nice throws, plenty of them in the couple tape that I saw of him at Oklahoma. He was able to do it at Alabama also. So I have him a fourth on my board. And the other thing I just want to talk about is just, do you buy any talk of, say, the teams that have older franchise quarterbacks potentially drafting a guy like a Jordan Love or anybody else that they may fall in love with late first, early second, and those teams being, say, the Saints, the Steelers? Of course, those make sense because Breeze and Roethlisberger, well, Breeze is already 40 and Roethlisberger is about 38. But also, say, the Falcons. I heard a rumor that they would maybe want to take a quarterback. I don't think it makes any sense. But I know Matt Ryan has a out, I think, in a year or two on his contract. Do you buy any of those teams taking a quarterback early in this draft?
Yeah, I definitely do. For the reason I said earlier, rule number one, if you don't have a quarterback, you go get one. Or if your quarterback's got one foot out the fucking door, then it's time you look towards the future. You don't want to be stuck like the Steelers, where you got a Big Ben and he's your unquestionable starter, but they tried to address it with a Mason Rudolph. Nobody was really sold on that pick. It pissed off Big Ben. And here we are where Mason Rudolph isn't quite seen as the answer at the position. Devlin was his fucking name, I think.
Devlin Hodges, yep. Hodges.
He's not the answer either. Okay, he's a nice little spark plug and a solid backup quarterback, but he didn't show that he was a franchise guy to make him want to pass. So, like a team like the Steelers, I don't know about the Falcons, but the Saints, the Steelers, the Patriots, why not? I mean, the Vikings, because Kirk Cousins is perennially mediocre, and if they're going to have him for another couple of years, and why not a guy like Love sit for a couple of years, learn? The one rumor that I heard, I don't know, a week or two ago, was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as a possibility for Love. Now, 14's a bit rich for my blood for Love. Maybe if they traded down, but if the top 4 tackles are off the board at 14, I don't know if you're taking DeAndre Swift there. I do have Swift as a first-round grade. My only running back with a first-round grade. He has at least questions at the position. But 14 might be a little rich for my blood for Swift as well, even though Tom Brady needs that running back. They can address that in the second round, I feel. So unless they trade up for a tackle or they take, I don't know, one of the Kinlaw or somebody like that, Love might be a good look. I mean, Tom Brady's fucking 100. He's only going to be there for another couple, maybe 2 years, maximum 3. And they're going to need a replacement. who better to sit behind? I know John spoke about this with John. Our buddy John's a big Bucks fan. And I spoke with him about this in detail. And he was fucking disgusted at the notion. Even if they traded down for Love, he was fucking repulsed. He's already disgusted that they got Brady because he hates Brady. But the thought of getting Love almost made him vomit on camera when we were video chatting. So that stands out to me, and it's interesting, but I buy it. I think one of these teams could definitely do it.
And from a Bucks perspective, fans' perspective, I don't think it makes a lot of sense either because Brady's only going to be there for max of 2 years, most likely. And maybe there could be another year, but right now his contract's only for 2 years. So you figure he's only going to be there for that amount of time. I'm not spending that first-round pick on a developmental quarterback. I'm just not. Now, if it was someone that fell into my lap like Tua, definitely run up to the podium. But not Jordan Love. If they took him in the second round, I still don't love it. To me, you got to give Brady whatever resources he needs right away to win, whether that is a running back or maybe a tackle. Those are clearly their biggest offensive needs. But again, this is a team that could use some help on defense. Their secondary has stunk for years, and they could use a pass rusher still because JPP is pretty old. Shaq Barrett's only on a one-year franchise tag. So I don't think it would be in their best interest, but I do buy some of the rumors because we know Arians likes working with quarterbacks. And because Brady isn't a long-term answer, it's only for 2 years. I just don't think it'll be a wise use of their draft capital. Now, the last
even before we move on, even like a team like the Packers, or hell, if the Dolphins decide to go rogue, pass on a quarterback at 5, and Love is sitting on the board at 18 or 26, then why not? Fucking do it live. Stock up on talent before you take a quarterback, whatever. But it is very intriguing, and we'll see what direction these teams go. But
right. So I'm going to hit you with 2 quick questions, see what you think about these quarterbacks. And just right before that, I think one team that's laying in the weeds is maybe the Jacksonville Jaguars. They really need a quarterback, but I feel like there's not a lot of buzz about them taking a quarterback, but they're sitting there at number 9, and they're sitting there at number 20 having the Rams pick from the Jalen Ramsey trade. They still haven't really addressed their quarterback position. I know they like Gardner Minshew. He played well last year, but still, he was a 6th-round pick. I think he should have a chance to start, but you need someone else in that quarterback room, and Josh Dobbs is clearly not someone that's going to compete for the starting job. To me, if Tua is there or Herbert at 9, I take him. Or, hey, even at 20, I could live with taking Jordan Love at 20 if they so choose. Let Minshew prove himself, and if not, you have Jordan Love. So that's one team I just want to throw out there. Now I'm going to throw out some betting aspects to this because there's some fun ones online. So I have 2 for the quarterbacks. Now, it's total quarterbacks drafted in round 1. Over or under 4 quarterbacks. It's 4 exactly. So if you want to say
under,
right on the number. Okay, so you're going under. So you don't think Jordan Love goes in the first round?
Fuck it. I'm not a gambling man, but fuck it. Let's do it live. I'm going to take the under on it.
Okay, interesting. All right, and that is the favorite actually right now at minus 180. I think it'll hit right on there. I believe that Jordan Love will get taken in the first round, along with Tua, Joe Burrow, and Herbert. Now, the other one I have is just who's the highest drafted quarterback from this group of 3 players? Jacob Eason, Jalen Hurts, and Jake Fromm. Jacob Eason from Washington. He had transferred from Georgia for those out there. And Jalen Hurts, we talked about a little bit, Oklahoma and Alabama quarterback. And then Jake Fromm was a 3-year starter at Georgia.
I have Hurts ranked higher. I'm going to go with Hurts. I know the man has a lot of love around the league, and coaches love the guy. He's another one of those fiery leaders. He can make all the throws. He looked very solid and improving as a passer this whole offseason circuit, including at the combine. He definitely held his own. I'm going to go with Hurts.
I agree. I like Hurts more than those other 2 players, and he's 4th on my quarterback rankings, so makes sense there.
So let's move on. I did talk about DeAndre Swift possibly being a target for the Bucks in the top 15, but this is a running back class that's very talented. I think it's a little under-heralded because it's seen as a top-heavy class in that it's DeAndre Swift from Georgia, Jonathan Taylor from Wisconsin, J.K. Dobbins from Ohio State, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire from LSU. All 3 guys are 3-down backs. All 3 guys showed their ass this past season. All 3 guys can be plugged in as day 1 starters in the NFL from the moment they're drafted. I only have DeAndre Swift as a first-round grade. That doesn't mean I have any issues with these other running backs. I'm just a little stingy with my grades. Now, there's 32 picks, of course, but there's not always 32 players worthy of those 32 picks. Granted, players are going to be taken anyway, but there's not always players worthy value-wise based on whatever reasons, medical concerns, off the field concerns, height, weight concerns, athletic testing concerns. No matter what the issue is, if it can knock a guy down. So for me, when it comes to giving up my first round grades, I'm looking for guys who have the least amount of questions, who have the least amount of problems. Very few prospects are close to perfect. None of them are perfect. Very rarely can they be considered a perfect prospect. Those guys are top picks, top two, top three picks. But I have 21 first round grades right now, and DeAndre Swift is that 21st overall player on my board. After that, I have second round grades starting with Jonathan Taylor. So for me, it's the grade. The grade is first round, second round like that, but it doesn't mean the player is that much less talented just because he doesn't have a first round grade. I love Taylor. I love all four of these backs. And I would have no issue if the Lions were to take any one of these guys in the second round or even trade it back up at the end of the first round to take one of them. I wouldn't even be upset with that. Bob, where do you stand with this current crop of running backs, and who do you consider? Do you consider Swift the top running back? Do you have somebody else at the top? How's that quartet shape out for you?
I am a fan of this running back class, mainly at the top. I don't think it's super deep. I think you'll find some decent pieces later on, but more specific to certain roles. But I do really like the top four, and I do have 9 in my top 100. I didn't go as deep as you. Kudos to Dan for doing a top 200 on his big board. I only have a top 100. But I do like these running backs. DeAndre Swift is my number one as well. I actually have 2 running backs inside my first round grades. I had one more than Dan. I have 22 first round grades. I actually have Swift number 17 overall on my big board. And then I have J.K. Dobbins out of Ohio State number 20. So those are my top 2 running backs. I think what sets apart DeAndre Swift for me, the running back out of Georgia, is just how quick he is, the burst, the explosiveness, the ability to make one cut, make defenders miss. He can hit those cutback lanes. He has good ball carrier vision. He's just dynamic with the football. He's a playmaker. You get the ball in his hands, whether it's running, receiving, whatever you want to do. Jet sweeps you could do with him. He's that quick. He's just a playmaker on the field. The only concern really for me is that he is small. That's going to be the knock on him. He's only about 5'8", but he does have good size to him. He does weigh, I believe, 205, 210. I think he checked in at. And so he may have a small frame that's prone to certain hits, but he ran well between the tackles. So I don't really worry about him being able to be a 3-down running back. Does he need to be spelled maybe more often than certain backs? Yeah, probably. At the same time, even though I have him number 17, I don't think it's prudent to, especially with the teams picking, I don't think he will be a top 20 pick. But if I'm in that 21 to 32 range in the first round, I'm very comfortable taking him, especially if I need a running back. I look at a team like the Dolphins. They could definitely be searching for a running back in this draft class. Seattle, they do have a decent stable there, but they had tons of injuries last season. So
I think Carson's a free agent as well.
Chris Carson's still a free agent. So you look at them. Rashad Penny they took a few years ago, so I think he will get opportunities. But there are some teams picking in the first round that could use running back, maybe even the Chiefs, whether that's DeAndre Swift or Jonathan Taylor. Damian Williams played well last year, but they could also look to add to that running back room. But DeAndre Swift's my number one, and I think he compares to LaShawn McCoy. Some comparisons I saw were Alvin Kamara. I see McCoy. I see that guy who's just very quick and is just devastating with that one cut.
How do you compare Swift to running backs that have been drafted recently that have been pretty solid, like Nick Chubb, Josh Jacobs? Do you consider him in their realm of talented young running backs, or do you think he's more Sony Michel, Kerryon Johnson kind of range?
I'm glad you asked that because I was thinking about that earlier today, particularly with Josh Jacobs, thinking back to last year's draft and thinking that if they were all together, I would still probably have Josh Jacobs number one. I forget exactly where I had him on my big board last year, but I feel like he was higher than where Swift is this year. I think he was higher than 17. But I still thought I actually had him pegged exactly where I thought he would go to, I think at 23 or 24 to the Raiders last year, just because we know how running backs are devalued in this league. So even though I think talent-wise these guys are higher on my draft boards, I get it. I get that there's not as much of a need. We're just grading them as far as prospects coming into the draft. So that's where there's a difference, team needs and salary cap ramifications and just general usage of the position factors in. There's so many different factors that go into this. So I think Josh Jacobs would still be ahead of all these players, and I think he's a better three-down back. I believe the same with Nick Chubb, but I see Swift being a player that can be a three-down back, and I honestly see the same thing for J.K. Dobbins and Jonathan Taylor, who slide in right behind him on my board. I have J.K. Dobbins 20th, and then Jonathan Taylor, similar to you, he starts my second-round grades. He's 23 for me as opposed to 22 for you. So they're all close together, but I just like DeAndre Swift a little bit more. And that makes me wonder who you like as your number two back, because I think it's someone different than me.
Yeah, I got Taylor as my number two. I love Swift for all the reasons you said. He's also a plus receiver for a college back. My only questions with him lie around like pass protection and stuff like that. Everything else, he pretty much checks all the other boards. I love J.K. Dobbins. I do have him as my third back, and then I got Edwards-Helaire as my fourth back, but they're so close. I like all these guys. Just plug them in, and they'll be fine. The only reason I don't have a first-round grade on Taylor is because he had a lot of fumbling problems. So does J.K. Dobbins. Dobbins had a bunch of fumble problems late in the season this past year, and he's another one who needs help in pass protection. Ohio State doesn't really give their running backs that opportunity to work on that. They have a very spread out way and get into space and stuff like that, and their backs don't really pass block. So I do like J.K. Dobbins, and I love these guys, but Jonathan Taylor is my number two. My only concern with Taylor, well, another one, aside from the pass blocking, because Wisconsin didn't really use him as a pass blocker that much. He fills all the boxes, but the fumbling problems are a big concern. He's had too many fumbles for my liking in his career. And the workload is a concern as well. There is a shelf life on running backs. We've seen it time and time again. The only guys who aren't, privy to that are like the elite of the elite, the top or upper echelon hose, the guys who are going to have those 10-year careers in the NFL at running back. So that's my only real concern with Taylor. But out of all of them, it was really like splitting hairs. It really is, because I think Edwards-Helaire might be the best pass receiver out of the whole bunch, which might make him very valuable to a team like the Chiefs, the Eagles, stuff like that, guys, teams that get the ball to their running backs in space and shit like that. We see that. And any of those guys can be that number one three-down back. So it's really splitting hairs, but I do have Taylor number two.
I have Taylor number three. The reason why I have Dobbins slightly ahead of Jonathan Taylor is I see more home run speed, and which is funny because Taylor ran a 4.39 at the combine, blazing speed. And when I watch the tape, I see that more once he gets that second gear and he's out in the open. He's got more of that long speed. But when you're talking about the line of scrimmage, both DeAndre Swift and J.K. Dobbins check more boxes for me as far as being very quick. They're very athletic, and they have that burst that I like more so than Jonathan Taylor. So that's probably the biggest reason I have both of them ranked ahead of Taylor. But again, it is splitting hairs. I think Jonathan Taylor has very patient feet. He does wait for his holes to develop, and part of that is kind of the scheme he plays in. He does have to wait a little more because they run more of a pro-style offense with Wisconsin, and more misdirections and traps and powers and just all different types of running plays, and not as spread out as Ohio State. They have more clear running lanes to go through for those guys. So that might the offense might have hindered Taylor from fully showing that. But yeah, the fumbles are also the problem that knock him down for me. But hey, he can play all three downs. All three guys to me can do that. So they all have that going for them. I didn't see much great pass protection from any of them. Some of them were decent. They had their moments. Other times, yeah, they got beat or didn't step up to the right guy, didn't read it right. But overall, no one stood out, so I'm not going to kill any of them individually for it. But I like Dobbins a little more for the home run speed. I love his bowling ball size. He just looks kind of like almost like a Maurice Jones-Drew out there. He kind of compares to like Devontae Freeman, has that similar build. Hopefully he doesn't have nearly as much injury problems as him at the next level. But they all have good hands, and it's just really the acceleration and burst that puts Dobbins and Swift over the top for me compared to Jonathan Taylor.
Love it. Now here's a real question: who's your fifth rated back?
That is a good question. Now, Clyde Edwards-Helaire does slide into fourth. He's mainly a pass catcher. That's what everyone's going to talk about with him. And to me, it compares to a former LSU running back in Kevin Falk, who spent many great years with the New England Patriots and was a big part of their early part of their dynasty. Only ran like a 4.6, but he's another player that plays faster on the field than he does in gym shorts, basically. So he's fourth for me, just like he seems to be for you. Number 5, I'd probably go with Cam Akers out of Florida State. That guy at times was the best player on the field for Florida State, even though they still play some good teams. Granted, the ACC is down over the past few years, but Cam Akers still was grinding it out for a team that stunk over the last couple of years and had coaching issues. And the Florida State fans are dying to get Willie Taggart fired, which they eventually did get their wish granted mid-season last year. But Florida State's had its own share of problems, but Cam Akers has never been one of them. So he's always going to give that effort. I think he is an athletic running back that's going to excel at the next level. I just don't think I have as much confidence as the other players that he's going to contribute every down or be as impactful even on a third down like Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
I don't think he's in the same realm as those other guys, but let's not forget Cam Akers was the second rated prospect or something like that overall when he was coming out of high school behind was it Najee, the running back for Alabama?
Najee Harris, yes.
Yes. Harris was the number 1 prospect, and I'm pretty sure Akers was the number 2 overall prospect.
Cam Akers has a lot of talent.
Yeah, or at the very least, 5-star and the second running back in the country, top 10, top 15 guy in the whole country in high school. But I really like Cam Akers. I think he was kind of screwed by the fact that Florida State was so piss poor on the offensive line, which, as you mentioned, I think leans more towards the coaching than it does the talent because it's Florida State. They're never going to have a problem getting talent. Ever.
They've been having great recruiting classes.
That's what I'm saying. They've been having real solid classes. It's not like they're falling out of the top 25 every year. They're fucking ass. They just weren't being coached well. So now they got a new coaching staff. Maybe things will start turning around there. Hopefully they don't. Hashtag Gator Chomp. But no, I like Akers. He's shown well as a receiver. He caught 16 passes as a freshman, 23 passes as a sophomore, and 30 passes this past season. So every year he's getting better as a receiver. He's showing he's got the chops, and he can do it. He scored 14 touchdowns this past year on the ground, 1,100 yards rushing behind a shitty offensive line and a terrible team. Then he showed his ass at the scouting combine, ran a 4.47 or something like that, and it was a really, really solid performance. I think he has really good potential, but the position doesn't really get a lot of love. So for me, he's sitting at number 77 on my board, but that's more because I think you can get him at that value. I think he'll outperform his draft position if he does go into 3rd, 4th round, something like that. But I see no issues with Cam Akers. He's, like I said, he's not with these other 4 guys, but he's real solid. And other than that, there's a lot of running back talent. You can take there's a lot of guys out there who I think can really produce depending on what system they're plugged into. They got to find the right fit, some of these guys. Zach Moss, Darrington Evans from Appalachian State, Antonio Gibson from Memphis, who doesn't really have a position. He played receiver for them and some running back in their system. And he looked damn good with the ball in his hand. So he's kind of like a sleeper for some analysts and stuff, and I can definitely see that coming out of Memphis. But it's splitting hairs at the position. A lot of these guys are going to need very specific offensive systems to really showcase their talents. But I am a big fan of Akers, despite him being a Seminole.
Right, and plenty of times we see players in the late 2nd, early 3rd at the running back position get taken, and they can start right away. There's no reason they can't win in training, can't battle, especially if they go to the right situation, and they become fantasy stars overnight. You see the Kareem Hunts of the world. You latch onto a team like the Chiefs, and you can be a star very, very quickly. Say if Cam Akers were to go to them late 2nd round, Cam Akers is in a great spot. But if he goes to, say, the Dallas Cowboys, he ain't going to see much playing time. Let's put it that way.
Correct.
It's all about fit, too. And the only other running backs that I want to throw out there, you mentioned a couple of them, like Zach Moss. So I have Cam Akers basically 63rd. Then I have Zach Moss. A.J. Dillon out of Boston College definitely has that big athletic profile. I think he's a little lumbering. I don't know if he's going to be a great three-down back. Definitely some questions there. But if you take him, say, in the third round, I have no problem with that. Keyshawn Vaughn out of Vanderbilt and LaMichael Pirine out of Florida. I know he had a bad senior year. He's going to get knocked down because of that and might find him outside of the top 100. I could very easily see that. I have him inside my top 100 very barely, but I think he could be a productive player at the next level.
Yeah, I couldn't disagree more about P. Ryan. You know, I watch every Florida game, and I was not impressed. I got P. Ryan as 182 overall on my board. So very big differences on that front. I just did not like anything I saw. I got, I think, a 6-round grade on the man, something like that. But to each their own, right? It's all about the flavor, baby.
Oh, definitely. It's all about the flavor. So we're going to have some stark differences in our rankings, and especially once we get to receivers.
Oh, yes.
Differences.
Oh, absolutely. And this is a receiver class. Let's not get it fucking twisted. This might be one of the most historic receiving classes we've seen in quite some time. Potentially, of course, but the talent is definitely there. Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, Henry Ruggs, Justin Jefferson, T. Higgins, Denzel Mims. These are all names that could be very well first-round picks. A lot of teams need receivers, especially in the second half of the first round. So we could see 4, 5, 6, 7 receivers. Brandon Ayuk, I hope I said his name correctly. I'm terrible at pronunciations. But he's another one. Michael Pittman Jr. from USC, Jalen Reagor from TCU. Hell, KJ Hamler, even though he's tiny and I hate the size, but these guys are all talented. Laviska Shenault from Colorado was once considered a surefire first-round pick. Shat a couple of years ago, dealt with injury issues, which knocks him down the board, but the physical talent's there. The yak is there. He's a real solid athletic player. But this is a stacked position. I have 14 wide receivers in my top 93. I got 15 in my top 103. Like, it's pretty fucking impressive, man. You don't have to reach for one of these guys. I mean, yeah, you'd love a Jerry Jeudy, you'd love a Lamb, you'd love a Ruggs, you'd love a Jefferson, you'd love those guys. You plug them in right away, you don't have any fucking issues. In any offensive system, damn near, inside, outside, they'll all be fine. Some of these other receivers down the line, not so much, which is why they're not first-round grades. For me, I only have 3 first-round grades. Four first-round grades at receiver. Jeudy, Lamb, Ruggs, and Jefferson. 6, 8, 12, 20 for me. But that's not an indictment on these other guys. T. Higgins is great. I know Bob loves Higgins. Denzel Mims has been just on a tear this whole pre-draft circuit, this whole postseason circuit. He's been doing his thing. He's a possible first-round pick, surefire second-round pick in my eyes. And then these other guys, they all stack up depending on what system they get drafted into. But where do you stand on this receiver class, Bob? How many do you have first-round grades on? How many do you have in your top 100? What's it looking like out there?
I like the running backs in this class. I absolutely love the wide receivers in this draft, and there's plenty to go around. I have 15 receivers inside my top 100, and more specifically inside the top 94. So my last receiver ranks there at 94. So 15 guys. That's a crazy percentage, but it's well-deserved. This is going to be the best wide receiver draft class since 2014. 2014, Sammy Watkins was the first one off the board, I believe 4 overall to the Bills. Now, that didn't pan out for the Bills, but he's been a productive receiver. He's on a second contract with the Chiefs, and he's still a productive player. Hasn't lived up to the draft status, but still a good player. And that's not even getting to Odell Beckham Jr., who was setting NFL records through his first few seasons. Mike Evans, who's just an automatic 1,000 yards every year in the league so far. Devontae Adams was a second rounder in that draft. Jarvis Landry. Kelvin Benjamin had a bunch of good years early on with the Panthers. So it's going to be the best class since then. You're going to see a lot of guys have similar impact to some of those players. And these guys, certain ones, will have 10 to 15-year careers in the league. It starts to me with CeeDee Lamb. Jerry Jeudy for a while, especially over the last couple of years, looking ahead, was one of the top receivers. And CeeDee Lamb has continued to rise. He didn't come out of nowhere. He's been at Oklahoma. Oklahoma churns out receivers with the best of them as well. but he's slightly ahead of Jerry Jeudy for me. I just think he's a little bit more dynamic. I just love how he plays. He's very physical and aggressive out there. He's got great run after catch ability. I
Yak.
believe he's great yak runner, and he really can line up anywhere. That's probably the thing that puts him a little ahead of Jeudy for me. Is I saw him line up at the X receiver more, spread out all over the field, sometimes tight, sometimes in the slot. But you saw more of Jeudy in the slot, and let's be honest, you want to have a guy who can line up, face that number one corner more often than not. And I just see more of that in CD Lamb. So it's really that. And I didn't see as many drops with him. Jeudy will occasionally have a bad drop, one that he'll catch 9 times out of 10, but for whatever reason, he just drops it. And I saw at least one of those against LSU this past year. He dropped an easy ball. And a couple others, I forget which game it was. It might have been their Citrus Bowl against Michigan. But basically, there was some times where I saw a little lack of focus that I didn't see with CeeDee Lamb. So CeeDee Lamb's my number 1 wide receiver, but he's 6 and Jerry Jeudy's 7. So it's splitting hairs. But Jeudy does have the better long speed. He did run a faster 40.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the only question with CeeDee Lamb is the speed. Like you said, he's not a burner. He doesn't show that deep speed that you look for, like a Tyreek Hill or someone like that who's just going to blow the top. Deshaun Jackson is going to blow the top off the defense. He's not one of those. But that's not a fucking problem. DeAndre Hopkins is not a burner. Devontae Adams is not a burner. Michael Thomas is not a burner. These guys ain't – yes, they can get wide open with their route running and breaking the jams off the line and stuff like that, yes. But they're not going to just straight up run a fly and burn everybody down the field. Fucking Randy out there. He's not going to do it, but that's not a bad thing. He's got the physique. He's got the hands. He's a great route runner. CeeDee Lamb, along with Jeudy, are among the most polished receivers I've seen coming out of college in the last few years. I have very few questions about them. And with Jeudy, I mean, it's nitpicking, but he's a little thin for his frame. He's physically not the most imposing guy. He played in the slot a lot, but it doesn't matter where he plays. But I think he's better than Amari Cooper coming out. He's better than Calvin Ridley coming out. And I'd put him just a few notches below Julio Jones coming out of college to where Julio was. Am I saying he's going to be Julio and a potentially top 3 receiver? Maybe. I do have Jeudy as my number 1 wide receiver. I have him at number 6 overall, but I have CeeDee Lamb at number 8 overall. So very close, just like the running backs. It's just a matter of what your flavor is. For me, it's Judy's been showing it. We know what he can do. We know he's an excellent route runner, maybe the best in the nation, if not one of the best for sure. And both of these guys are plug and plays. Now, the ones that stand out are Ruggs and Jefferson. Those are the more common guys who are looked at as potential first-round picks. Definitely Ruggs, and he seems to be all over the board. Like I've seen him go as high as 11, 12, 13 in that range, 9 to the Jaguars in some random cases. Like we've seen that, and then we've seen maybe dropping into the 20s, and we've heard teams like the Chiefs interested in potentially trading up for the guy if he drops into the 20 range. The Eagles would absolutely love Ruggs to fall. But how do you stand on these two guys? Because on one hand, we have Jefferson, who from LSU, he had an amazing season, 111 receptions. I think he had 18 receiving touchdowns, something like that, just ridiculous. Burrow's favorite target besides Chase, who's probably going to be a top 10 pick next year, the other receiver at LSU, who was a sophomore, I believe. And, yeah, I don't mind Jefferson at all. He's got the route running. He can catch in traffic. We saw what he did versus Clemson. It was very impressive. That defense is littered with NFL draft picks, including guys like A.J. Terrell at corner and stuff like that. So not too shabby to see him shit on that stage. And he played well throughout the playoffs. It wasn't just during the season for LSU. He had a very, very consistent, solid season. And it's nice to see what he could do with an actual quarterback, considering the problems LSU has had at the position historically, especially the last decade, seemingly at the position. But then you look at Ruggs. And he world-class speed, Tyreek Hill-esque speed, just a fucking just track runner, blow the top off the defense. But he's not just a deep threat. Ruggs looks real solid. He looks like someone who can run a full route tree. The route running is there. You question the production. This is one of those classic production versus talent debates, and there's a lot of those in this draft class. But it's a fair thing to wonder, because one of Bill Parcells' rules when it came to drafting players, particularly quarterbacks, but players in general, was he wasn't too worried about how fast they were and shit like that. But one of the things he looked for was how they produced. Were they productive? That was one of his key things he was looking for when he drafted players. And that is something that's very relevant because a guy can have the speed, he can have the home run threat, he can have a quick release, he can have those explosive cuts where he doesn't lose any speed or nothing like that. But then he's not big. He's already had issues with drops. He's not a jump ball receiver. We haven't seen it. And he's not really been more than a number 2 or number 3 option for them. Granted, that has more to do with Alabama's talent at receiver than it does with his talent. But it's relevant stuff. So, Bob, where do you stand on these guys? And do you have any other receivers in the first round besides Ruggs and Jefferson? Do you even have them as first-round picks? Where do you stand on this receiver class after the big 2?
Well, I'm glad you asked. So it starts with the big 2, CeeDee Lamb, who I compare favorably to Devontae Adams. That's who he reminds me of most. But I've seen a lot of good comparisons for him. Some people saying Chad Johnson, Anquan Bolden. You mentioned one in DeAndre Hopkins. I see elements of those guys, but I most see Devontae Adams, basically. Jerry Jeudy, a little more difficult. He slides in right behind CeeDee Lamb for me. Someone said, I believe it was Mel Kiper said, Marvin Harrison. I don't see it. Yes, he lines up out of the slot. But Marvin Harrison was much more athletic, which Kiper did mention. But I just don't know if he's going to be that dynamic as Marvin Harrison. And then I've seen OBJ comparisons. Maybe a poor man's OBJ. I see some elements of that, so I think that's fair. But then once you get to those next few guys, there's more things to nitpick at and worry about. And I do have Henry Ruggs third on my receiver rankings. He comes in at number 11 overall. So he's still very high on my overall draft board. And I don't have too many concerns, even though the production wasn't as high as some of his teammates, particularly Jeudy, or even other guys around college football or get in this draft. He's at Alabama. A lot of mouths to feed. We know that. But he still put up nice numbers. He was still productive. I saw a good route running. And as you mentioned, just explosive speed. Tried to break John Ross's record at the Combine. Didn't happen, but he still ran about a 4.27, which is absolutely insane. That's incredible speed. I think he'll be a great deep threat. I think he'll be a better pro than college player. He's third for me. Then 4, it's actually T. Higgins. I love T. Higgins.
Okay.
And my receiver rankings aren't like a lot of people's. Not to be totally different, but this is just how I feel about them. I like T. Higgins' size more. He's almost 6'4". I love that he can win a 50-50 ball. He's very aggressive. He's highly competitive out there. He's just a mismatch for most corners. He's got really strong hands. You don't see him drop many balls. Great focus. He's just a prototypical red zone threat. So he's 4th on my list, and he checks in at 15 overall on my big board. To me, he's a more athletic Mike Williams, another Clemson receiver. But to me, that's who I see in him. I've also seen comparisons to Tyrell Williams, which is fair because he's about that same size, 6'4", 210 or so. Higgins still needs to fill out his frame. That's kind of a concern. He's got a slight frame, but if he adds 10 to 15 pounds of muscle, I think he'll be fine. But I love his fire, his competitiveness. He did it at a big program, so he's 4th for me. 5th is where I have Laviska Shenault, actually. Now, the draft process seems to actually hurt him some, but I don't think it should. I don't know if that's necessarily fair. He needs to show better durability. He's one of those players who has good but not great size, good but not great speed. But I just think he's a great football player. When he's out there, he's a threat, and he did it for a Colorado team that is not one of the best teams in the Pac-12. So he checks in at number 5 for me. I don't even have Justin Jefferson till number 7, actually, surprisingly.
Wow. Okay.
I like Michael Pittman Jr. out of USC a little more. He's number 29 on my board. I have Shenault at 24. So Justin Jefferson's number 30. So he's right next to Michael Pittman Jr. And as I mentioned before, I have 22 first-round grades. So no, I don't have Justin Jefferson as a first-round grade. I think it's just kind of he's one of those so-called safe picks. But I don't love his upside. I don't love his ceiling. I think he was a product of that system. Jamar Chase definitely popped more. Even though he didn't have as many TDs, he didn't have 18 TDs. Jamar Chase is the more dynamic playmaker. Justin Jefferson will be great out of the slot. He'll still be a productive pro, but I just don't see someone that's going to be better than, say, like a Sterling Shepard. Good player, but nothing more than like a number 2 at best at receiver for your team. So that's where I have Justin Jefferson is actually 7 and right outside the first round. I think he probably will go in the first round, late 20s, probably to a team like the Vikings, who's very wide receiver needy right now. After trading Stephon Diggs, he could be sliding in at number 25. But any of these guys that I just mentioned, Higgins, Shenault, Pittman Jr., Jefferson, all going to be in that late first, early second range. And it's just a matter of which guy fits certain team systems better.
Yeah, exactly. As we were talking about with the running backs, what's your flavor? What do you want? What are you looking for? What kind of offensive system do you run? If you run more of a vertical spread out system, a Justin Jefferson might be a better fit than a Shenault, who Shenault will probably fit better in a West Coast offense because he's so thickly built. And I liken him to a injury prone Deebo Samuel. He's got that thick build. He can get the yak, like Bobby had mentioned, and he's good size, not great, like he said. He's good speed, not great, like Bob said. But the talent is there, and he dominated as a sophomore. He was pretty much their whole passing game. And if his quarterback was a little better, like Justin Jefferson's quarterback got a lot better. If his quarterback was a little better, he probably, and he was healthy, probably would have been a prettier season. But I don't mind that at all. I don't mind it not one bit. Now, is there a receiver outside of that group? Not the first tier, not the second tier. Do you see any receivers available maybe in the third, fourth, fifth, later rounds that one reason or another isn't getting that kind of love, but maybe someone that stood out to you, someone that, depending on your system, of course, they might be scheme specific for whatever reason, but that you like, that stood out to you? Any receivers that, like I said, not in that upper echelon group, not in that second tier, but someone who's got those starter qualities that if you took a late flyer on, they could stand out like a Darius Slayton did for the Giants.
One of those guys for me is probably Antonio Gandy Golden out of Liberty. I think he's a player that played at a lesser school. They're they moved up in the last year or two to be a FBS independent, but previously they had been FCS at a lower division. But I think he's a player that in the right scheme can be one of those players that comes out of nowhere that no one expects to be highly productive, but is at the next level and maybe is a better pro than he was a college player. I mean, he produced at Liberty, don't get me wrong, but I think at the next level, he's someone that you take in that fourth, fifth round, he slides because there's so many good receivers. Plenty of them did it at a higher level of competition, doing it in the Big 12, SEC, ACC, all those Power 5 conferences. So here's Antonio Gandy Golden sliding in as my 13th receiver, 83 on my board, kind of gets buried, lost in there, but could be someone that if he plays well in training camp can start for a team, especially if he goes to a team that maybe is a little bit barren there, maybe doesn't have a clear number one, say a Jacksonville Jaguars, if they were to take him somewhere in the third round or fourth round, or even a team like the Cowboys who would use more talent infusion at their receiving core. Yes, they have Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup, but after that, nothing to get excited about. Tavon Austin, Randall Cobb's gone. They don't have much else in that room. So a lot of teams could be looking in those later rounds for someone that could be a gem. And I think he's one of them. I think he's one of those small school sleepers that could be very productive at the next level. And even though he's 13th, he could very well outproduce plenty of the guys ahead of him on my list.
I love it. That's awesome. Let's move on to tight end. It's not a class that really stands out with any superstars. I don't foresee any first-round picks. I don't know if there'll be any early second-round picks, but I do have second-round grades on 3 tight ends. Cole Kmet at 56, Adam Troutman at 57, Bryson Hopkins at 66. And honestly, similar to receiver, similar to running back, I think the tight end position is what's your flavor? Who stands out to you? What do you need? Any of these guys, I even think it could be up to 6 or 7 tight ends who are starting quality, but they all have their individual questions, whether it be talent concerns in that, the competition, like Troutman with Dayton, whether it be the fact that there might be 1-year wonders that have separation issues like Kmet did at Notre Dame, whether it be are they too one-dimensional like Thad Moss, who's a great blocker but not the most athletic guy, which is surprising considering his father. Then you got a guy like Bryson Hopkins, who he could be the number 1 tight end in this class. I love him as a receiver, but he leaves a lot to be desired as an inline tight end. And he has a well-rounded game, but it's the drops. Drops really stood out to me for Hopkins. Albert O from Missouri, okay, Gundam style. He
You love saying his name. I know you do.
What do you want me to do? It's a ridiculous name. I love it though. But he's my number 5 tight end, right inside my top 100, and he might be the most athletic guy in this whole fucking class at the tight end position. Dominated the fucking combine, ran a crazy 40, and really stood out. And the talent's there for a guy like him too. But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Bob has a different 1, 2, 3 or a different top 5. I wouldn't be surprised if we talked to 10 people that everyone had a different top 5 order. It's that kind of class. There's no standout number 1 consensus guy. What's your tight end class? Your tight end rankings looking like at the moment? Who's your top tight end?
Well, for one, do you think any tight end goes in the first round?
No, I do not. And I would be surprised if any of them went in the top 50, to be completely honest.
I agree. Although we saw last year a blocking tight end like Drew Sample go in the mid-second round and Josh Oliver. So we saw some surprises even last year, and I think some of these prospects are better than them, but I agree. I don't think any of them should be picked in the top 50. I do have Cole Kmet as my 38th overall prospect, but again, I just don't know if there's going to be a team picking in that top half of the second round that really wants to invest pick there on a player like him when there should be so many talented players sliding in this draft. It's a very deep draft. You do have some very high-end talent, but we talked about wide receivers being very deep. We haven't even gotten to offensive line yet, but the tackles are very deep. So there's going to be certain players at those positions that are just going to slide down because of teams' needs at, say, quarterback or pass rusher. They fall in love with a certain receiver or corner. And good players are going to be available at the top of that second round. Or even we will see some of the better running backs maybe slide there. So I think they aren't going to be picked in the top 50. But I do have Kmet as my number 1 tight end. Number 2, I have Bryson Hopkins out of Purdue. Number 3, I have Albert Okwebunam out of Missouri. I've seen him slide a lot, but he was one of the top players last year at tight end. If he had come out, he didn't kind of hurt his stock because he didn't produce at a high level this year, had his worst yardage total in his 3 years at Missouri, but he still produced 6 touchdowns. He had 25 or so in his career, a little under that, actually, 23 TDs in his career there. But I have him number 3. I think, he might not be the greatest blocker right away, but very dynamic. If, say, he was going to Tampa Bay, that would be perfect. I think Brady would make use of him like Aaron Hernandez way back when. So I have him 3, Hunter Bryant 4, Thaddeus Moss 5, and then Harrison Bryant 6. Those are the guys that are in my top 100 on my big board. And I really do like Thaddeus Moss, obvious bloodlines. His dad was Randy Moss. Looks nothing like him, though. He plays tight end. He's a big-bodied boy. Doesn't really look at all like him, but he does have the sticky hands, and he did make some very impressive catches at LSU, and he can actually block. So I think he's a player that was hurt because he did actually get physically hurt at the combine. He had a foot issue, I think the 5th metatarsal. He's having that. He had that surgery around that time. So unfortunately, he wasn't able to participate in the combine to full effect. Was going to make probably not for his pro day, but still, I think he would have benefited from not having the coronavirus situation going on and actually meet with teams, get his physicals checked out. I think it's going to push him down the board. I don't see him getting picked in the top 100, but he is someone that I think will present a great value in those middle rounds and outperform his draft status.
And for me, my top 3 tight ends are all within a 10 pick range. So I got Cole Kmet at 56, Troutman at 57, Hopkins at 66. And then I have Brian at 94 from Washington and Albert O at 98, rounding up my tight ends who rank inside my top 100. So a lot, as you guys are seeing as we go on position by position, there's a lot of what your flavor is. And we have to discuss that because it's so important. The way we have to scout and the way we do our boards and shit are totally different than teams because we don't have specific systems that we have to worry about. We don't have specific programs that we're looking to follow. We don't have to worry about any of that. We're just looking at who the best players are, what their issues are, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, etc. We don't have to worry about how they react to coaching and do they fit our system and stuff like that. So our rankings are definitely a little different than how teams do them individually, piece by piece. But the sheer fact that I have 3 tight ends and within a 10 number ranking between each other, it should be pretty telling to what kind of a class this is. It's not over the top, but it's very solid, and I think you could get some real solid starters in the middle and late rounds as well. And finally, Bob, let's wrap it up previewing the offensive side of the ball for the 2020 NFL draft with the offensive line. It's an interesting class, and it's not lacking talent. Let's just say that very conservatively. You could see up to 6 or so, maybe even 7 offensive tackles taking in the first round. Guys like Wirfs, Wills, Becton, Thomas, Jones, Jackson, Isaiah Wilson from Georgia as a potential flyer. Ezra Cleveland, maybe even. So you could have 6, 7, 8 offensive tackles. Everybody needs offensive line help. It's just a matter of, do they fit the scheme? How's the value for that player at that position at the draft? Teams will have to negotiate that, but everybody needs offensive line help. Everybody needs an offensive tackle. There's a handful of teams that you can say have absolutely no needs at the tackle position. And it's partially because there hasn't been that much upper echelon talent coming out of college at the offensive line positions, particularly tackle, in recent years. And the NFL's changing. And with it, so do position needs, so do position strength, the strength of the value of that position and stuff like that. Like some of these guys might be looked at as strictly right tackles, like Jack Conklin. Yeah, Jack Conklin, the Tennessee Titans right tackle, well, former Tennessee Titans right tackle, went to Cleveland this offseason as a free agent. He played left tackle at Michigan State, but he was projected to be a right tackle in the NFL. That was his spot to be a Pro Bowler, and that's okay because everybody needs tackles. It's that fucking simple. NFL defensive linemen are getting more athletic every year. They're getting longer. They're getting stronger. They're getting faster. Their feet are quicker. You got guys who might be 6'4", 250, but they can plow through a 350-pound offensive lineman like he was like turnstile, like nothing, because they're that powerful and that quick. So teams are always looking to stock up on the offensive line. And this year, this is a great opportunity for these teams to take advantage of that. For me, I've got 4 offensive tackles in my top 15. I got Wirfs at 10, Wills at 11, Becton at 14, and Thomas at 15. Is there any particular reason? Very, very slight reasons. It's just, what do you want? What do you like? How do you feel? So like these guys are like 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D. Like I would have 0 issues with Andrew Thomas being the first offensive tackle taken. I think it's a little ugly, but dude, 3-year starter in the SEC at left tackle for a major program, a championship contending program, going against some of the best defensive linemen and the best defensive schemes and pro-style players in the SEC, and showing his ass, dominating at that level, that's impressive. Showing his athleticism and the tape is impressive. So, like, yeah, I have him at 4 and I have him at 15, but I wouldn't have any issues with him going first or second behind Wirfs or Wills or whoever. But it's a very interesting class. I have Josh Jones from Houston at 29, Austin Jackson at 30 from USC, and those are that's it. Those are all my offensive tackles who I have in the top 32. Bob, what's your offensive rankings looking like? At least that offensive tackle before we slide inside.
Well, this was a subject of much debate between us over the last month or two,
Mm-hmm.
seeing who we thought was really the best offensive tackle. And I really had an enjoyable time diving into the tape. Now, I'm no expert. I don't pretend to be. We're just two guys offering you our opinions, but we do the work and try to dive into the tape and this combine. Unfortunately, we don't have access to talk to team personnel and find out what kind of guys these players are, but we
Mm-hmm.
find out a decent amount from what we see and what we hear from different websites and podcasts and what have you. So it was a lot of fun diving into this. And ultimately, my number one winds up being Jedrick Wills from Alabama. I believe he's just the most fundamentally and technically sound at this point, and really not only a safe pick, but a player that I feel confident in starting at either left or right tackle for 10 years for my team. He does a great job walling off defenders in the run and the pass. Like I said, very technically sound. He's not as physically imposing as some of the other players. Tristan Wirfs has that like lower half and that athletic profile. He ran a 4.84, which is ridiculous. So teams covet that raw talent combined with being a tackle in the in the Big Ten for many years. But with Jedrick Wills, he's just very consistent, and he did block Tua's blind side. He was at right tackle, but what people need to remember is obviously Tua is a left-handed quarterback, so he was protecting his blind side. And I just feel like he was most consistent between him, Wirfs, Becton, and Andrew Thomas. So I have him as my number one tackle. He's number 9 on my big board, and to me, compares favorably to Brian Bulaga. I'll admit this wasn't my own. I saw it on a website, but I honestly think it's the best comparison. I couldn't really come up with a better one that maybe people would know from a current player. So Jedrick Wills is number 1 for me. Number 2 at number 12 overall on my big board is Tristan Wirfs, the tackle out of Iowa. Now, he's a devastating run blocker. He always looks to get to the second level. That's something that separated him and Jedrick Wills for me, is they're always looking to get to that second level. They're athletic enough to do it, and they play with somewhat of a mean streak. They're always looking to road grade the next defender, whether it's a linebacker, corner, safety, it doesn't matter. So they're definitely a great run blocking. Problem for me with Tristan Wirfs is, even though he has a decent kick slide and sometimes he can wall off quicker rushers, he has a problem with bull rushes. I saw him get pushed deep into the pocket on a lot of plays. Two of the tapes that I watched the most of were at Michigan and the USC bowl game from this past year. And he really struggles with some power rushers. I think that's going to be a big problem for him at the next level. And also sometimes he just leans too much, and that could also be a problem. And I can see basically through watching the tape why some teams even project him to play guard, at least initially at the next level. I think it's going to be really hard for him to play left tackle in the league. So I really can't be putting, with these talented players and 5 of them inside my top 32, I can't put him at number 1 with good conscience, knowing to myself he's not a left tackle in the league. He's just not, in my opinion. And then 3 and 4 are Andrew Thomas and Mekhi Becton. I do put Thomas 13th overall, Becton 16th overall. Thomas I compare favorably to DeBrickashaw Ferguson, longtime starter for the Jets at left tackle. He's got massive arm length, 36 and an eighth inch arms. He gets full extension, can ward guys off. I'm not really sure why he's fallen in the draft process. Originally, early on in the process, September say, he was a top 5 pick. Everyone had him in the top 5, top 10, top 3 even at times. And he's slid, and even today I scoffed at our friend having him in the top 10 of his mock. And it's not so much I hate Andrew Thomas, it's just from everything I've seen and heard over the past couple months is he's not going to be the top tackle or even the second tackle off the board. Teams are falling in love with these other guys, especially after the combines that Wirfs and Becton put up.
Yep.
So honestly, I think it's unfair a bit. I think Andrew Thomas deserves to be a top 15 pick. If I were to be a betting man, it's over under 10.5. And I was saying to Dan before the show, I'm planning to hammer the over. I think he's going outside the top 10, but watch some team like the Jaguars and the Browns screw me at 9 and 10 and take him. It could definitely happen, especially if some of these other players are off the board at tackle. So
yeah, it definitely
me,
could.
Andrew Thomas is my 3rd. He's great at sustaining blocks. He held up very well against Calebon Chason, who's an edge rusher in this draft, arguably the second best pass rusher. And there's only one time really where he beat him on the outside with his speed and quickness. But for the most part, held him in check, did well against LSU. Whereas Mekhi Becton out of Louisville, I mean, their offense is just hard to grasp what kind of tackle he's going to be at the next level. He definitely doesn't get to the second level like these other tackles available. Yeah, he's 6'7", 360, absolutely massive. He's similar to Trent Brown, who signed that big deal with the Raiders last offseason. But the way they play offense, so much pistol and quick bubble screens and a ton of pistol plays and bootlegs and rollouts with their athletic quarterback. I just don't know what I can really expect out of Becton at the next level. I mean, he's massive. It's going to be hard to beat him with any kind of bull rush. He will ward off even the biggest men in the NFL. But at the same time, is he athletic enough? Is he going to gain too much weight? And especially against quick rushers, I think he's going to really struggle, at least initially. So does he have the talent and potential? Yes, but he's one of those typical high ceiling players, but high ceiling is somewhat of a cop-out to say, well, if he doesn't reach it, he just wasn't with the right system or whatnot. But I am a little cautious about Becton. It looks great. Had a great combine, but also with the rumors lately that he failed the drug test, he could be sliding down boards anyway.
For me, Becton stands out as like a Greg Robinson type, because Greg Robinson coming out of Auburn a few years ago, where he went second overall, I believe, to the Rams at left tackle. He was very much like Becton, not the size that Becton has, because very few people on this earth have that size. But the athleticism, he did have that prototype size at the position. I still think he was, 6'5", 6'6", 320 or something like that. So he had the size. He was a big boy too. Let's not get it twisted. But he wasn't 6'7", 350. So Becton is, the word escapes me, but he could either be one of the best offensive tackles in the league, or he could be the next Greg Robinson, because the physical traits are there. He's got great feet. He's strong as shit. He's massive. No one's going through him. You're going to need a while to get around him. He's lengthy. He's nimble on his feet. I mean, both running the ball, he's extremely effective in the ground game, as you can tell. He is effective in space when he gets out there. He's, like Bob said, he's not great at the second level, but he's got amazing lateral quickness, which we saw at the combine. The testing showed that, and he's going to be a top 15 pick, and I would have no issues plugging him in day one at left tackle. However, he's really fucking raw, just like Greg Robinson was. The talent's there. Talent is there, but he's going to need a good offensive line coach and a solid system to really coach him up. He's going to need to work on his hands. He's going to have to work on his balance. There's a few things there that he needs to get. He gets a little too aggressive at times and can lunge and stuff like that. But if he can get some solid coaching and keep his weight in check, I think he'll be a real solid prospect. And like I said before, you could have these four guys in any order, and I wouldn't even be upset. I wouldn't even have any issue with any of these guys being a first tackle off the board, because it'll depend on what this team is looking for. But outside those big four, there's still a lot of talent. I mentioned 4 or 5 guys that could be first-round picks: Josh Jones, Austin Jackson, Isaiah Wilson, Ezra Cleveland, who coincidentally the Cleveland Browns seem to be really hot on Ezra Cleveland. So if they don't go offensive tackle in the first round, maybe he's there for them in the second round. Something special on that front. Manipulate the board, if you will. But I currently have 10 offensive tackles in my top 75 picks. And
interesting. I have actually 10 tackles in my top 91. So close.
So it's close. It's close, but we might have some different names and have them in different orders, but this is a solid year. If you need a tackle, that second round is a wonderful place to be. Early third is a wonderful place to be.
All right, so let's dive into this. So in the next tier, so we have the top 4. We little differences between us, but we both think they're all top 15 picks. And at least for Mekhi Becton, the good thing is he's not going to be, if he does bust at the next level, I don't think it's going to be on the level of a Greg Robinson or a Jason Smith, because he's not going to go in the top 5 or top 8. I think he's in that teens range, and I do worry about him maybe being like, say, Michael Oher, where you love the physical traits and the pedigree and playing in not the SEC, excuse me, but playing at a major school like Louisville. But I don't know if I don't feel as comfortable pegging him day one. Let's just put it at that. But
Fair.
you see the profile being a franchise left tackle down the road. But do you think, say, Austin Jackson is a first-round pick? And I bring this one up because it's one of the interesting bets that I looked at for the NFL draft. And it actually shows no is plus 215. So you can actually make money betting on him sliding out of the first round. So they actually have much more favorable odds that he will. It's minus 325 that he will. Do you see him being selected in the first round out of USC?
I'm going to say no, I do not. Now, that being said, I do have him as my 30th overall prospect. So it would not surprise me at all if he went in the first round. And as I said before a few times, every single team in the NFL needs a tackle, whether it be a left tackle or a right tackle. Everybody needs help. Damn near everybody. So he could very well. His position is valuable enough that it could drive him into the first round. But I think his soft spot is somewhere in the early second round, and I think that's inevitably where he'll go. But he's another one, just like Becton. He's like Becton light. He ain't massive like Becton, 6'6" or so, 305, 310, something like that. So he's not the massive human being that Becton is, but he does have that prototype size. He's just also really, really raw. He's another one who needs help with his hands. Sometimes he can get caught holding. He needs to work on some of his strength when he's trying to drive guys in the run game. But he's another raw developmental prospect who has a lot of the natural talents that you look for in a left tackle or in a starting tackle in general. Quick feet, good bend at the knees, not really issues with waist bending or anything like that. These are things that you look for in your tackle prospects. So while he's not perfect by any means, that's why he's not a first-round grade for me, and I don't see him as a first-round pick. I could definitely see it, but I'm going to say no. He's not going to be a first round.
He might wind up being a first-round pick, but I agree. According to my board, I have him 40th overall, and he would be my sixth tackle. I have Josh Jones out of Houston ahead of him. And now I would be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about a small school prospect named Robert Hunt out of Lafayette.
That's my boy.
There was a Bobby Hunt a long time ago in the NFL that played safety for the Chiefs and had a very productive career. Now, granted, they spell their name H-U-N-T. I spell mine H-U-N-D-T. The German flavor to it, I suppose.
They ain't got no D.
With that D in there. But Robert Hunt is a small school prospect that's rising on a lot of boards. And the rumors I've been seeing lately is that he's a second-day pick. He's going to be picked probably in the second round, but definitely at least in the second or third rounds. And he's a player that can start at tackle, probably more right tackle at first. But he's a player that's been rising up a lot of boards, has good size, and even though wasn't playing at an elite level, people think he can make the jump and play well in the NFL. What are your thoughts about Robert Hunt?
Well, I'm just going to say I love me some Robert Hunt. I'm a fan of Robert Hunt in so many ways. Robert Hunt is one of my favorite people. Oh, wait. Oh, you meant the guard. I'm sorry. Yes, Robert Hunt from Louisiana Lafayette. I do like him very much so. I don't see him as a tackle, however. I think his key position will be at guard. I think that's where he'll excel. That's not necessarily a detriment to him and his talent. He's got good build. He's got good feet for a big guy. It's just I see him struggling at the next level against quicker outside guys. Like, he's good to get to the second level. He's good in space, which is nice. You look for that. I think he's better, would be better in like a zone blocking scheme. But his arms are too short, 33 and a half inches at the combine, just doesn't do it for me. Can you get by with short arms at tackle? Absolutely. I think Jonah Williams had that problem last year, and it didn't stop him from being, I think, 11th overall. But he's not a complete player. I do like Hunt, and I think he'll be a starter in the league. I have him as my fourth interior lineman at number 79 overall. So right inside, right at the third round level grade-wise. But I have him right behind guys like Cesar Ruiz, Tyler Biadasz, and Lloyd Cushenberry from LSU. Those are my top three interior offensive linemen. But I love me some Robert Hunt, man. He was a starting tackle at Louisiana Lafayette. He's real solid in pass blocking, but he's a guard. that's where he would succeed. If you put him at tackle, I don't think he's going to be that great. But
I do have him at tackle. He is 9th on tackles for me, and I have heard plenty of that too. That he might be more of a guard at the next level, and I could see it. He might be one of those mean streak type guards that you get moving in space, as you talked about, and get to the second level, be pulling on plays, zone blocking. I do think he will be a starter probably early on in his career, but it might be better suited to be at guard, like you talked about. And as far as talking about the interior line, I mean, we'll talk about whatever you want as far as the offensive line. We're going to jump around now because we talked about the top tackles. But Cesar Ruiz, I don't see him as a first-round pick, but we always seem to see one of those interior offensive linemen slide into the late first, especially when teams need a center. Even Eric McCoy, granted, he didn't go in the first round, but he went, I believe, mid-second round last year. The Saints traded up to get him out of Texas A&M. And Cesar Ruiz seems to be a player that is being pegged a lot to the Chiefs with that last pick in the first round at 32 overall, or maybe even a team like the 49ers would be interested in a lineman like him. Is Ruiz your top interior lineman, and who else do you have in your top 100? Because I have Biotish and Cushenberry as well, and that's it for centers. I only have a couple guards as well. I think only 2 or 3. Let's see, 4. Shane Lemieux out of Oregon, Solomon Kinley of Georgia, Bredesen out of Michigan, and Muti out of Fresno State. So I only have 7 interior offensive linemen in my top 100.
I have 4. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. Interior linemen in the top 100?
Yeah, so we're counting centers and guards. Now,
yeah.
There are going to be some differences, a lot of differences here, because one person might see someone as a guard, others might see him as a tackle. And we just saw that with me having Hunt as a tackle. That is what he played at college, but some people like Dan see him as a guard at the next level.
I've got Ruiz at number 32, but overall interior offensive lineman that I have ranked in the top 100 is 8. 8 total interior offensive linemen in the top 100. But outside that top 100, there's also some good talent later on. Guys like Ben Bartch from St. John's is one of those guys who played tackle, probably a guard in the NFL. Very talented. He's one of those late round guys, 3rd, 4th, 5th rounders that you could slide in at guard and get away with him as a starter. Nick Harris from Washington, probably playing center. Netane Moody from Fresno State at guard, strong as hell. So I don't think these guys are I think these guys are more late round picks. Like, so for example, after the top 100, between 105 and 200, I've got 19 players.
Wow. That's a 18
lot. Players, something like that. So it's like, it's very much what's your flavor. And for me, I have a couple tackles that were tackles, but I think they'll be better as guards. So like Ben Bartch is one of them. Tyre Phillips from Mississippi State is another. Robert Hunt played tackle. I see him as a guard. Hakeem Adeniji, from Kansas, played tackle at Kansas, probably a guard in the league. So it gives you options, but it's an interesting class interior as well. And again, this is the year, if you need offensive linemen, this is the year to really, really go for it. And late first, if it's not the upper echelon guys, and you're going in the late first, early second. And I think Cesar Ruiz is the first interior lineman off the board. And I mean, I could see him going as high as maybe like Baltimore or maybe even Seattle, Miami needs offensive line help all over the place. So why not? Why not one of those teams?
Definitely. At that bottom first round, I could see plenty of those teams being interested in interior offensive line or at tackle. Either one. They all could use some type of offensive lineman. And like you mentioned a little bit earlier, everyone needs some help. There's very few teams, maybe only a handful, that could say they couldn't use another lineman or someone to start. You figure, 5 positions on the O-line, it's very difficult, especially given the salary cap era, to feel like you have no issues at any of those positions. And I could definitely see the Ravens doing it. The Vikings still need plenty of offensive line help, so they got 2 picks in that back half of the first round. It should definitely be looking at offense for them. So I look at teams like that, and yeah, Cesar Ruiz could very well find himself in the first round, even though I don't see him there. I see him as a mid-second rounder. I have him 43 overall on my board. Biotish is 49, Cushenberry 57, And I really don't have any of the guards very high. I don't know where you have your highest one ranked, but for me, my highest ranked straight up guard is Shane Lemieux out of Oregon at 78. So that's only a mid third round grade.
Well, as per, we have very similar rankings, all similar area for our
Stop
rankings.
stealing my rankings.
I have Biadasz at 63, Cushenberry at 65, Ruiz at 32, as I mentioned, Robert Hunt at 79, and then I've got, you mentioned Lemieux, I got Lemieux at 87. So pretty similar. Second, third round picks. That seems to be the range, the sweet spot for those guys. But one more question before we put a wrap on the offensive side of the ball. Let's go back to the offensive tackles for a quick second, because we talked about the top guys, we talked about the first round guys, but we didn't really talk about after that. There's going to be a shit ton of tackles taken after that. So let's show some love to those guys real quick before we put a wrap on things. Outside of the first round, do you have any offensive tackles that you were scouting, that you watched, that really stood out to you for one reason or another? Someone that you wouldn't mind taking a swing on if your team needs a starting tackle. Maybe you miss out on one of those top guys, the first round guys, the top of the second round guys. You're beyond the Jacksons, the Lucas Niangs out of TCU. You're beyond Isaiah Wilson, Ezra Cleveland. Do you have any tackles that you look at that have some favorable skill sets or something like that that really stand out, that you would target, that you could plug in, maybe not right away, but that you would feel comfortable taking in the mid rounds with some starting potential?
Well, I did mention Robert Hunt. I do think he could start at tackle. He's someone that could outperform his draft status. So that's one. But also maybe Jack Driscoll out of Auburn. I think he's a player that, being someone that played in the SEC over the last few years, got overshadowed by other talent around him, but I think he could be a decent starter at the next level. And he's not going to be picked very high, so he doesn't have to worry about that per se. But if he goes to a team that maybe doesn't address tackle early, maybe a Cardinals or Jaguars, or even if the Chargers don't, maybe the board doesn't, or the board does fall the way they want, they can get a quarterback, or say they take Isaiah Simmons at 6 because he falls there, and then they take Jordan Love in the second round. They're still a team that could definitely use offensive line help. So if I'm, say, a team like that, I take Jack Driscoll in the 4th or 5th round, wherever it may be, if he somehow is there. And I think he can slide in right away and play from day one. Is it ideal? Maybe not. He doesn't rank as very high on my list as some of these other offensive tackles, but I think that's one of those later round guys that I do think could be a good player at the next level.
I love it. For me, my guy that stands out is Prince Tega Wanogo. I hope to God I'm saying that correctly, because I suck at pronunciations, as I've said time and time again. But he was Auburn's other quote-unquote offensive tackle, 6'5", 310. He also falls into the Greg Robinson class of offensive tackles, the Eric Fisher class of offensive tackles, in that he got the prototype size, prototype length, started at a marquee program, excellent in the run game, athletic as shit. Like I said, he's got the length, he's got what you look for, the mirroring at the position, but he's another one who's just super duper raw. And we know how tough the SEC is, and we know what kind of teams that Auburn plays, and we get it. We get their system. It's wide open. They run the ball a lot, and he's very physical at the point. But he's not at the same level as some of these guys. The lunges, he lunges a bit when he pass blocks. He can be had, and there's been, like, I guess, character concerns in that teams have, I guess, questioned his attitude off the field. He's got short-ass arms, 33-inch arms. There's been, I guess, questions about his love for football or lack thereof, stuff like that. So where some of these other guys that not only have the skill set, he has that skill set. He's got those tools to mirror and pass protection, to shut down guys. And he's fast, man. He's got it. It's just he's so fucking raw. As of now, I really like him, but I got him at number 74 on my board. He's my last offensive tackle in the top 100. After that, it's a fall off. My next one is at 130. So I think he is, like, the last guy you want to take if you're looking for a solid developmental prospect. After that, like you said, Driscoll's pretty solid. I like Driscoll. I have him at 134 overall. Another cluster of offensive linemen that I have ranked between in a 10 number range between one another. But it's not an indictment. You just got to rank these guys, and this is how it falls. For different systems, different guys will stand out. But here we are.
Right, and compared to Jack Driscoll, his teammate, Driscoll was on the right side and doesn't have nearly the ceiling that Tega Winogo or whatever you say, however you say his name, does. He doesn't have the athletic profile necessarily, but what he does have is more the technique and basically just he's more fundamentally sound. But yeah, he's going to struggle with some bigger, quicker pass rushes. He may not be, the left tackle at the next level, and that's why he was at right tackle at Auburn. So Driscoll, I think, can slide in, plug and play right away at right tackle, but either one has their warts. They both have their own different problems coming out of Auburn, but still got the guys that are going to get drafted coming out of that factory mill that is the SEC, and they both could be prospects that outproduce their draft status. And even though they're going to wind up being not even maybe even the 10th tackle off the board, they might be way past that. They could be good pros. It's just the class is so deep at tackle.
And I've got about 40 players that I've got a separate list for with their specific red flags. And in big, red, bold lettering, I have Prince, red flag, off the field. Which that seems to be a theme with him. If the off the field questions weren't a thing, teams can't interview people. We talked about this before. Video interviews, maybe, but those are so limited and so important. You're not going to waste them, quote unquote, waste on a player like that and just talk to him and see if you can gauge how he feels about football moving forward and his passion for the game and is he coachable. You're not going to get that in a video interview. So that's going to hurt him, but he's just one of those guys, man. He stands out. He stands out a lot, and I think he'd be something special. He just got to get his shit together. But that being said, I think that's a wrap for the offensive side of the ball. Unless, Bob, you want to add something special that we didn't touch on?
No, I believe that's all for me. A lot to dive into, a lot of great offensive prospects in this draft. It really does rival the defense. I mean, there's some great positional groupings on the defensive side of the ball, but on the offensive side, wide receiver and tackle are arguably the top two.
Arguably is absolutely right. And I'm pretty interested to see how this some of these positional rankings come out. It's easy to say who the top guy is at certain positions, or who the top two guys are, like Judy and Lamb at receiver, or Burrow and Tua at quarterback, or Komet and Troutman at tight end, stuff like that. It's cool to talk about those, but teams may not agree. We might see somebody like Lucas Niang out of TCU go at the end of the first round because he fits a scheme or something crazy, or Isaiah Wilson or somebody like that.
There's always a couple shocks, even at the top of the board. Someone will probably be picked in the top 10 that we thought had no business being there. Probably might still have a first-round grade, but you look at last year, Cleveland Ferrell winds up being the number 4 overall pick to the Raiders, or Daniel Jones at number 6. You fall in love with certain prospects, and in those cases, Ferrell bumped up from being maybe a mid-teens pick to being 4th. Daniel Jones, I had around 35 or so. I had him as the 3rd best quarterback. You had him even later, like 50.
Yeah, I think I had him like the 50s.
And he winds up going 6 and actually had a productive rookie year. So you just never know. But we're going to see some surprises, but there's so much talent in this draft that I don't think we'll see as many as we usually do in the first round.
I love it. So with that, let's put a wrap on the offensive side of the ball, our preview for that. We will be doing another video just like this for the defensive side of the ball, where we'll cover everything that goes on that side, go over some rumors, our rankings, and all that good shit. Be sure to give us a follow on Instagram and on Twitter. Bob, what's the handle?
Those handles are DB Talking Sports, D as in Dan, B as in Bob. That's on both Twitter and Instagram. I run the Instagram. Dan takes care of the Twitter. You can also hit us up if you know us personally on Facebook or text message us. Or if you don't, please subscribe on iTunes or any podcast site or platform that you listen to. And we appreciate any and all feedback, whatever you want to talk about, whether it's football related or not. Right now, we're deep into the NFL draft, and with everything going on, with everything going on in the world, it's really all that's going on. But if you have a question about something else, feel free. But right now, for the next few days, we're under 72 hours until the draft, and it's a great time to be a football fan. And I'm excited, and we're going to be doing defensive rankings, like Dan said, and talking about that side of the ball, but also a mock draft. We're going to bring in one of our buddies, have 3 of us doing it, a mock draft where we rotate picks. And there's a lot of great content that we're going to be putting out there, and we really love to find out what you liked, what you didn't like, and hit us up on either of those spots, DB Talking Sports.
I love it. I'm Dan Kornhauser.
I'm Bobby Hunt.
Thank you guys for tuning in, and we will catch you guys later.